The royal court of Zalthara stood silent under the high crystal ceiling. Golden light floated in the air, reflecting from alien symbols carved into the walls. Nobles from many powerful races filled the chamber. Standing in perfect rows, they had gathered for one reason only. At the center of the court stood Queen Merida, ruler of the Star Empire. Her crown was heavy, not just with jewels, but with years of pride and duty. Beside her stood her daughter, Princess Liara, tall and graceful but painfully quiet. Her eyes were lowered, her hands clasped tightly. One by one, the representatives of great clans had spoken, and one by one they had refused. Some gave polite excuses, some were cold and honest. Our bloodlines are not compatible. Our people will not accept her. The risk is too great. Each rejection struck the queen like a blade. Each word pushed the princess deeper into silence. The court watched, pretending not to enjoy the moment. But whispers moved like poison through the air. Finally, the queen could not remain silent anymore. Her voice broke through the chamber, loud and raw. "No one wants my daughter as a mate," the queen cried out. The words echoed against the walls. Impossible to take back. A deep shock filled the court. Queens did not show weakness. Rulers did not speak pain aloud. But this mother did. Princess Liara felt her chest tighten. She had expected rejection. She had trained herself to accept it. But hearing it spoken so openly still hurt. Her difference was known across the empire. Some said she carried an ancient genetic flaw. Others believed she was marked by a forgotten curse. Whatever the truth was, powerful races feared binding their future to her. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Some watched with quiet interest. No one stepped forward. The silence stretched, heavy and cruel. It felt as if the future of the royal bloodline was ending right there. At the back of the hall, among attendants and lesser beings, stood a human. His name was Daniel. He was not a noble, not a warrior, not even a guest of importance. He worked as a human liaison and systems assistant, easily ignored. Daniel watched the scene with growing tension. He had seen the princess before. From a distance, she had always treated humans with respect, never with pride or cruelty. As the silence continued, something inside him tightened. He could see the pain in the queen's face. But more than that, he saw the loneliness in the princess, a loneliness he understood too well. The court expected the moment to pass, for the queen to regain control, for the humiliation to be buried under protocol. But it did not happen. Instead, a quiet step echoed through the hall. Then another. Heads slowly turned, confused and irritated. A human was walking forward, straight into the center of the royal court. Gasps spread instantly. Murmurs grew louder. A human. Does he know where he is? Queen Merida stared in disbelief. Princess Liara lifted her head for the first time. Her eyes met Daniel's, full of shock and confusion. Daniel stopped a few steps from the throne. His heart was beating fast. Every instinct told him to stop, but he did not. "I will step forward," Daniel said, his voice clear but calm. The words hit the court like a wave. Silence returned, sharper than before. The nobles stared as if reality had cracked. A human offering himself where powerful races had refused. It felt unreal, almost insulting. The queen slowly stood from her throne. Her eyes narrowed, trying to understand what she was seeing. "Human," she said, carefully. "Do you know what you are saying?" Daniel nodded. "I do," he replied. "And I know I am not what you expected." Princess Liara felt her breath catch. She did not know why this human had moved, but for the first time that day, she felt seen. Anger rose among the nobles. "This is a mockery," one shouted. "Humans are weak," another added. Daniel did not argue. He simply stood his ground. Sometimes courage was quiet. The queen raised her hand, forcing silence again. Her gaze moved between the human and her daughter. Something ancient stirred behind her eyes. The court did not yet understand what had begun. But one step had already changed everything. If you enjoy emotional HFY sci-fi stories like this, gently consider subscribing to the channel so you do not miss what happens next. High above the court, unseen systems activated, old laws waited to awaken, and the fate of a princess, a human, and an empire began to shift. The royal court did not move for several long seconds. Daniel stood alone in the center, surrounded by power he did not belong to. Alien nobles stared at him as if he were a mistake that had learned to walk. A low sound of anger spread through the hall. Some laughed quietly, some whispered sharp words. A few looked truly offended. "A human has no right to speak here," one noble said. "This court is not a place for servants," another added. Daniel felt every word like pressure on his chest. But he did not step back. He kept his eyes forward, his hands steady. Queen Merida slowly stepped down from her throne. Each step echoed through the chamber. Her expression was no longer broken, but dangerous. "You are far from your place," she said. "Tell me why you walked forward." Daniel swallowed. He knew one wrong word could end his life. "I walked forward," he said, "because everyone else walked away." A sharp silence followed. Princess Liara felt her heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken like this before, especially not a human. One of the high nobles raised his voice. "Humans are short-lived," he said. "They cannot protect royal blood. They cannot carry empire legacy." Daniel turned his head slightly. "I am not offering power," he said. "I am offering choice." That word struck harder than any insult. Choice was dangerous. Choice was unpredictable. The queen studied him closely now. "You understand what it means to step forward," she said. "You may be challenged. You may be broken. You may be erased." Daniel nodded once. "I understand." Princess Liara took a small step forward without realizing it. Her guards tensed instantly. The queen noticed, but said nothing. "Why her?" the queen asked suddenly. "Why my daughter?" Daniel hesitated for the first time, not from fear, but from honesty. "Because she stood in silence," he said, "and still carried herself with dignity." A quiet shock moved through the court. No one had described the princess that way before. Not as a symbol, not as a problem, but as a person. Princess Liara felt her throat tighten. She had been prepared for rejection again, not for understanding. Anger finally broke loose among the nobles. This is emotional weakness. This is manipulation. This human seeks status. Queen Merida raised her hand again. Her voice turned cold. "Enough," she turned back to Daniel. "You will remain under guard," she said, "until the council decides whether your words deserve punishment." Guards moved immediately, surrounding Daniel. Metal hands closed around his arms. He did not resist as he was taken away. Daniel looked once more toward the princess. Their eyes met for only a moment. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. The court slowly began to break apart. Voices rose again, louder now. Some demanded Daniel's execution. Others demanded investigation. Deep beneath the palace, in restricted halls, ancient systems awakened. Records long untouched began to glow. The human word choice echoed through old laws. In a guarded chamber, Daniel was pushed into a simple holding room, the door sealed behind him. For the first time since stepping forward, his legs felt weak. He sat down slowly, breathing hard. He did not know if he had just saved a life, or destroyed his own elsewhere. Princess Liara stood alone in her private chamber. Her hands trembled slightly. No one had ever stood for her without being ordered to. She whispered softly to the empty room. "Why would you do that?" High above, Queen Merida entered the council vault. Ancient symbols reacted to her presence. She spoke a single command. "Show me the law." The vault responded with light and warning tones. Something old had been triggered, something that did not care about pride or politics. As the doors closed behind the queen, and the guards tightened around the human, the empire stood at the edge of a decision it could not undo, because a human had stepped forward, and silence would never be enough again. Deep beneath the royal palace, the council vault came alive. Old lights awakened one by one, casting long shadows across the ancient walls. Queen Merida stood alone at the center, her face calm but her thoughts heavy. The vault was older than the empire itself. Its records were not meant to be used, only remembered, and only in moments of great danger. "Show me the law," the queen repeated. The air vibrated softly, symbols formed in the space before her. Slow and deliberate, words written in a forgotten age appeared. The law of sacred union, This Queen's breath slowed as she read. This law was created when the empire was young and weak, a time when survival mattered more than pride. The law spoke clearly. If royal blood is rejected by all bound powers, if no noble race steps forward by choice, then the throne must accept the willing outsider, no matter their origin, no matter their strength. Queen Merida closed her eyes briefly. A human, she whispered. Elsewhere in the palace, Daniel sat alone in his holding chamber. The room was quiet, too quiet. Guards stood outside, unmoving, watching. Time passed slowly. Daniel replayed the moment again and again in his mind. The queen's cry, the silence, the shock in the princess's eyes. He wondered if he had made the worst mistake of his life, or the most important one. The door opened without warning. 2 royal guards entered. There, faces unreadable. Come with us, one said. Daniel stood, steadying himself. He followed them through long corridors lit with soft blue light. Every step felt heavier than the last. They stopped before a smaller chamber. Inside, Princess Liara waited. She stood near the window, her back straight, her hands folded. The guard stepped back and sealed the door. For the first time, Daniel was alone with her. You should not have done that, she said quietly. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. Daniel nodded. I know, he replied, but I could not stay silent. She turned to face him. Her eyes searched his face carefully. Do you understand what you offered? She asked. I understand that I offered myself, Daniel said, and that scares everyone. A small, sad smile appeared on her face. It scares me too, she admitted. Before either could speak again, the door opened. Queen Merida entered, her presence filling the room. The guard sealed the door once more. The queen looked at them both, at her daughter, born of power and duty, and at the human, born of nothing but choice. The law has awakened, the queen said. Her voice was steady, but the words carried weight. Daniel felt his chest tighten. So it is true, he said. There is a law. There is, the queen replied, and it does not care about comfort. She turned to her daughter. You have been rejected not because you are unworthy, she said, but because others fear what they cannot control. Then she faced Daniel again. You stepped forward when none would. That action cannot be erased. Around the palace, news began to spread. Whispers turned into arguments, arguments into fear. Nobles gathered in private halls. This cannot be allowed, one said. A human binding to the throne would change everything. Others were quieter, more afraid. Law does not lie, they said, and it has never been broken. In the outer systems, long-range sensors activated. Unknown forces noticed the shift in imperial energy. Old enemies paid attention. Back in the chamber, Princess Liara spoke softly. What happens now? She asked. The queen did not answer immediately. She looked toward the window, toward the stars. Now, she said slowly, the empire must decide whether it still believes in its own laws. Daniel felt the air change around him. He was no longer just a human in the wrong place. He was a question the empire did not want to answer. Far below, the vault dimmed once more. The law returned to silence, but its presence remained, because, once awakened, some laws do not sleep again. The council chamber was filled again, but the mood was darker than before. Tall figures stood in tight groups, whispering with sharp eyes and tense faces. The idea of a human stepping forward had already shaken the empire. Now the empire demanded proof. Queen Merida sat on her throne, her posture firm and unyielding. Princess Liara stood beside her, calm on the outside, restless within. Daniel stood alone in the center of the chamber, unarmed and unprotected. Senior noble stepped forward, his voice loud and cold. If the human truly believes he is worthy, he said, then let him prove it by our laws. Murmurs of approval spread quickly. Trials were tradition. Trials were dangerous, and many hoped the human would fail. Queen Merida raised her hand. The law allows a challenger, she said, but it also protects the chosen. She looked directly at Daniel. You may step back now, she said. No shame will follow. Daniel did not move. He took a slow breath. I will prove myself, he said. The chamber fell silent again. Princess Liara felt her heart tighten. She wanted to speak, to stop this, but she knew this moment belonged to him. The first trial was announced without delay, the trial of endurance, a test designed for alien bodies stronger than human ones. Daniel was led into a vast open arena. The floor was made of living stone. Shifting underfoot, the temperature changed. Without warning, from freezing cold to burning heat, observers watched from above. Some curious, some eager for failure. The trial began. Gravity increased suddenly, forcing Daniel to his knees. Pain shot through his legs and spine. His breath became heavy. Many believed this would be the end. Humans were not built for this, but Daniel did not surrender. He adjusted his stance slowly, shifted his weight, moved with care instead of force. Minutes passed, then more. The arena continued to test him. Heat, cold, pressure. Daniel focused on one thing only. Standing, not winning, not impressing. Just standing. Princess Liara watched in silence. Her hands clenched. Every time he stumbled, she felt it inside her chest. When the trial ended, Daniel collapsed to one knee, still breathing, still conscious. Shock spread through the observers. He survived. Someone whispered. The second trial came faster. The trial of judgment. A mental test, not of knowledge, but of choice. Daniel was placed inside a projection field. Images formed around him. Scenes of power, scenes of fear, scenes of sacrifice. A voice filled the space. Choose your future, it said. He was shown visions of ruling beside the princess, of commanding fleets, of humans raised above others. Then another vision. Walking away, returning to a quiet human life, anonymous and safe. The watchers leaned forward. Most expected ambition. Daniel spoke calmly. I choose neither, he said. I choose the path where no one is forced. The projection froze. Confusion rippled through the system. The voice fell silent. Queen Meritha's eyes narrowed with interest. This was not an answer the system was designed to hear. The final trial was announced by the nobles themselves. The trial of loyalty. A simulated threat was released. An attack scenario targeting the Yo. Princess. Daniel was given one command. Run instead. He moved toward the danger. Without hesitation at all, Princess Liara watched as he placed himself between her image and the threat. Again and again, no matter the outcome. The simulation ended abruptly. The chamber stood silent. Even the nobles had no words. Daniel stood exhausted, bruised, barely steady, but his eyes were clear. Queen Meritha rose slowly from her throne. The trials are complete, she said. She looked at the nobles. Strength failed. Tradition failed. The choice did not. Anger flickered across many faces, fear across others. Princess Liara stepped forward at last. Her voice quiet but firm. He has proven more than worth, she said. Outside the chamber, unseen forces shifted. Old enemies listened. Old systems awakened. Because proving oneself was never the end. It was only the beginning. The Empire did not celebrate the human survival. Instead, doubt spread faster than respect. In hidden halls and open courts, laughter followed Daniel's name. He survived tricks and simulations, nobles whispered. But he is still human. Weak bones, short life, soft heart, Daniel felt the change immediately. Guards still protected him, but their eyes questioned him. Servants watched him closely. Respect had not arrived yet. Princess Liara noticed it too. She saw the way nobles spoke louder when Daniel entered, the way smiles turned sharp, mockery wrapped in politeness. One noble lord spoke openly during council. Trials mean nothing, he said. Let the human face real danger. Others agreed quickly. They wanted proof written in pain, not courage. Queen Meritha remained silent. Silence was her weapon. But she allowed what came next. A challenge was announced across the capital. A public test, not a trial of law, but a test of worth. Daniel would accompany a border patrol to the outer ruins. A place abandoned after war. A place where failed defenses still slept, and enemies sometimes returned. Laughter followed the announcement. He will run. He will break. Daniel heard every word. He said nothing. Humans learned long ago that silence could be strength. Before departure, Princess Liara found him alone near the hangar. You do not have to go, she said softly. This is cruelty, not justice. Daniel shook his head. If I step back now, he said, it will never stop. She looked at him carefully. Why do you keep standing? She asked. Daniel thought for a moment. Because humans are always told where we belong, he said, and we survive by stepping forward anyway. The ruins were quiet when the patrol arrived. Too quiet, broken towers leaned like old bones. Dust covered everything. Alien soldiers moved. With caution, Daniel followed. Unarmed, alert, he felt the tension in the air. Then it happened. Old defense machines woke without warning. Not simulations, not controlled tests, real weapons. Energy blasts tore through the ground. One patrol unit fell. Instantly, shouts filled the ruins. The soldiers froze, confused. Their systems did not respond fast enough. Daniel moved. He grabbed a fallen device, rerouted power by instinct. Not with training, but with understanding. Fall back, he shouted. His voice cut through panic. A machine turned toward him. Weapons charging. Alien soldiers shouted warnings. Human move, Daniel. Did not. He stepped forward, drawing fire, buying seconds that saved lives. An explosion threw him into broken stone. Pain filled his body, but he stood again. Princess Liara watched the feeds from the capital. Her breath caught as she saw him fall. Then rise again. The patrol regrouped. Using Daniel's improvised signals, they disabled the machines one by one. When the battle ended, silence returned. Smoke drifted through the ruins. Daniel collapsed to his knees, exhausted, bleeding, alive. The soldiers stared at him differently now. Not laughter, not mockery, but shock. Back in the capital, the footage spread fast. Nobles watched the human stand between death and retreat. They watched him take pain meant. For others, no speeches followed, no apologies, but silence returned again. A different kind of silence. Queen Merida turned away from the screen. When humanity is mocked, she said quietly, it answers with survival. Princess Liara closed her eyes. For the first time, she was afraid of losing him, not to law, but to fire and cruelty, far beyond the ruins. Unseen eyes observed the transmission. Enemies noted the pattern. Humans did not dominate. They adapted, and that made them dangerous. As Daniel was carried back to the ship, unconscious, one truth settled into the Empire. Mockery had failed, and the next test would not be words. The capital woke under heavy silence. News of the border incident had spread through every level of the Empire. No one laughed anymore when the human's name was spoken. Daniel recovered in a guarded chamber near the royal wing. His body was weak, covered in bandages. But his mind was clear. He remembered the ruins, the fire, the fear in the soldiers' eyes, and the choice he made without thinking. Princess Liara stood outside his chamber for a long time. She had not been allowed inside yet. Royal law demanded distance, but her heart demanded closeness. Inside the High Council Hall, the nobles gathered again. This time their voices were not loud. They spoke carefully, as if the walls themselves were listening. He survived again, one noble said. Survival does not make him worthy. Another replied. Queen Merida listened without interruption, her expression unreadable, but her thoughts were heavy. The old laws were clear. The daughter of the throne was not meant to choose freely. Marriage was alliance, not emotion, but the laws were written in. An age without humans. Without Daniel, Princess Liara entered the hall without announcement. Gasps followed her steps. Daughters of queens did not interrupt councils. She stood before the throne, her voice steady. I ask for the right to speak. Queen Merida looked at her daughter for a long moment, then nodded once. Liara turned to the nobles. You have tested the human, she said, with law, with cruelty, with danger. She took a breath, and each time he chose others over himself. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away. He did not seek power. She continued. He did not demand reward. He stood when he was mocked. He stood when he was bleeding. Her eyes met her mother's. And now I will stand. Murmurs rose instantly. This is not tradition. This is not allowed. Princess Liara raised her hand. I am not asking permission, she said. I am claiming my choice. The chamber fell into chaos. Voices overlapped. Old fears returned. Queen Merida rose slowly. The room fell silent again. The law forbids choice, the queen said. But the law also exists to protect the empire. She stepped down from the throne, walking until she stood beside her daughter. If the law breaks the empire, she continued, then the law must bend. Shock rippled through the hall. Never before had a queen spoken those words. Queen Merida turned to the guards. Bring the human, she commanded. Daniel was brought in slowly, supported but standing. He looked confused, unprepared. Princess. Liara stepped toward him. Her voice softened. You were never meant to fight alone, she said. Daniel shook his head slightly. I did not do this to claim you, he said. I did it because it was right. She smiled gently. That is why I choose you. The words echoed through the hall. Not shouted, not forced. Chosen some nobles protested loudly. Others remained silent, calculating. Queen Merida raised her hand again. The daughter has chosen, she declared, and the empire will answer. Outside the palace, crowds gathered, humans and aliens together. Whispers turned into questions, questions into hope. Not everyone celebrated. Hidden forces moved in shadows old. Enemies saw opportunity, because a daughter choosing freely was more dangerous than war. Daniel stood beside the princess, uncertain of the future, certain of one thing. Choice had power, and the flame that once tested him had not burned away his humanity. It had revealed it. The empire did not sleep that night. Lights stayed on in towers and streets. Messages moved faster than ships, because the impossible had happened. A human had been chosen, not by law, not by force, but by the daughter of the throne. Daniel stood in a quiet chamber, overlooking the capital. The city looked endless from above. Alien worlds never felt small, and for the first time, neither did he. Princess Liara stood beside him, not as royalty, not as a symbol, but as someone who had made a choice. You will be hated, Daniel said. Quietly. Some already hate me. Liara nodded. I was born into expectation, she replied. You were born into survival. Outside the palace, the reaction grew. Some cheered. Some protested. Some watched in fear. The nobles were divided. Old families whispered of rebellion. Younger ones saw opportunity. Queen Merida observed it all from the high balcony. Her empire was changing. Whether it wanted to or not, she remembered her own youth. A life shaped by duty. A love never chosen. And she wondered what kind of ruler her daughter would become. The council gathered one final time. This was not a trial, this was judgment. The human cannot be a mate, one noble declared. He represents weakness. Another stood, voice shaking. He represents unity. Arguments clashed like weapons, but none could erase what had already happened. Queen Merida rose, her voice calm, her presence heavy. You feared no one would want my daughter, she said. You feared the empire would reject her. She looked across the chamber. But the truth is this. She chose someone who ran into fire. She chose someone who stood when mocked. She chose someone who protected others without promise of reward. Her eyes narrowed. That is not weakness. Silence followed, deep and final. The decision was announced across the empire. The human would be recognized, not as a conqueror, not as a ruler, but as a mate chosen by will. Celebration and anger erupted together. Change always hurt before it healed. That night, Daniel walked the palace halls alone. Guards no longer questioned him. They watched him with respect. He stopped before a window where firelight reflected from distant towers. The same fire he once ran into. Princess Liara joined him. Do you regret it? She asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. I never expected this, he said, but I would choose it again. Far beyond the capital, enemy fleets adjusted their plans. The empire was no longer predictable. Humans were no longer background figures. A single choice had shifted balance. The mate no one expected did not arrive with armies. He arrived with scars, with restraint, with humanity. And that terrified the galaxy, because fire had tested him. Mockery had tried to break him. Power had failed to corrupt him. And love had chosen him. As the twin moons rose over the capital, a new chapter began, not written by law, but by choice, and the empire would never be the same again.